Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of Kircudbright Common Good Fund Subcommittee, which is being live streamed and recorded. The recording will be made available on the Council website for public listening. The first item of business that we have today is the appointment of a chair, and I am looking for any nominations. Do we have any nominations for chair?
I'd like to nominate John Dennerley.
I'm happy to second that if John's up for the cause.
And I'm happy to accept that as well. Thank you very much. The only thing is the interpreter has not had the chair notes, so the information won't be difficult. So if you could email it to the interpreter, that'd be great, just to help make sure that the information is correct when he's interpreting.
We'll need the contact details for the interpreter, if that's okay.
Should I put them in the chat for you?
Could I just suggest that we adjourn the meeting for a couple of minutes just so that we can get that established, please? Thank you.
So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for nominating me as the chair. I want to formally start now. So just following the good practice guidance, making sure that we're muting ourselves and to stop any interruptions. And if you want to speak, please type in the chat box, speak. And if something has been mentioned already, please do not repeat that from the other members. And any materials part of this discussion as well, do not include them. If there is any, if any member decides to leave the meeting, please put in the chat box leave, just so make sure we can, and if you do join back onto the meeting as well, just so we can then record that down into the notes of when people left. Sorry, just one sec. Yeah, all members should speak clearly and directly into the microphone when making contributions and when referring to reports. Please provide reference to the relevant page and paragraphs to allow everyone to follow. And please focus contributions on areas where clarification is required or purpose or alternative to any recommendations. So on section 1, Ingrid, could you please provide the Sidurian indicating who is participating remotely, and any apologies, please?
Yes, I can confirm that we have Councillor Andy McFarlane, Councillor Dougie Campbell present in the room, and we also have Councillor Dennerley, who is with us, joining us today via Teams. We also have our Community Council representative, Lindsay Forbes, in attendance today as well.
Okay, I confirm my agreement to the participation of members named as participating remotely. Thank you for that. Do any members of the Community Council representative have any declarations of interest that they'd like to mention?
Councillor
Do we have
Campbell?
one there? Sorry. Ian?
Yeah, thank you. It's in relation to agenda item 5, the application from Kircudbright Parish Church for a grant from the Common Good. The interest that I have is that a member of the church board was in contact with me in terms of that application, not on the basis of the merit of the application, but on the process followed by the Common Good subcommittee. So I don't see any need for me to withdraw on that particular item.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you very much, Councillor. Any other people have any declarations of interest? No? Okay, great, thank you. From previous meetings on the 18th of August 2021, is everyone happy? Are all members happy with the notes?
Yeah, well, I'm the only one that was there, but yes, I am happy.
And we don't have a second for that now. Yeah, fine. You have to carry on with that. Thank you. So the property and assets of Kircudbright Common Good Fund. I want to welcome Tom Higgins, who's on Teams, to answer any questions.
Sorry, Chair, can I just say that?
Or address any comments. Sorry. Any comments from members of the subcommittee? Sorry, what was that?
Apologies, Chair. Just wanted to make you aware that it's actually Catherine Swan that I think we have online to answer any questions or assist with any member comments.
Okay, thank you very much, Catherine Swan. Who's here to answer any questions or address any comments from members of the subcommittee?
Could I just say good afternoon, Chair and the committee. I apologise, I'm full of cold, so if you can't hear me, please ask for it to be repeated. I introduced the paper, which I'm sure you've already read, and I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
Yeah. Sorry, I can't see that.
Mr. Chairman, as regards note 4, property and assets of Kircudbright Common Good Fund, could I please draw members and officials' attention to the narrative on page 9 of the papers in front of you, in which, on page 9, it is stated that these assets are apparently belonging to the former borough of Dalbeattie.
Yeah. Anyone wants to have a response to that or any comments regarding that?
I can just say that I must apologise, there has been a typo.
I note that. I also have to advise the committee that Kircudbright Community Council, because of various events and because we do not meet in August, have not had time to actually look at all the property that is listed by the legal department of the council and make any comments about it. Some of the property, personally, I am surprised about, but they are mentioned. In particular, I would comment on Kircudbright tennis courts, where members may care to note that there is an application before the council, I understand, on behalf of Kircudbright tennis courts for this property to be transferred to the club. My only interest in this is that I am the examiner of the accounts for Kircudbright Tennis Court, which is a registered charity with Oscar.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Any comments on that, Catherine Swan, or any other members of the committee like to comment on anything to do with that?
Chair, if I could just come in saying that we currently have an expression of interest for a community asset transfer for Kircudbright tennis courts, and we're supporting, through myself as the local ward officer, that group to look at their business plan and their stage 2 application.
Okay, thank you. Catherine, would you like to also?
I was just going to say exactly the same thing.
Okay, thank you. Are you happy with that response, Councillor?
Yes.
Yeah, Councillor, sorry.
Could I come in,
Yeah.
convener?
Yeah.
Thank you. Catherine, it's a question in relation to paragraph 3.3 on page 10, reference to further research been done in relation to the garage site at Stirling Crescent, Kircudbright, and the garage site at Woodlea, Burnside Loaning. Could you explain to us what the delay is in these two particular properties and when we're likely to get confirmation? Thank you.
As far as I'm aware, it's still with legal, who are checking out the old deeds.
And do you know how long that's going to take, Catherine?
I can't actually answer that, but I will take a note that I will report back, having checked this with my colleagues, and I will report back to the chair.
Thanks, Catherine. That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Is everyone else happy with what's been discussed? Any more answers or comments? If not, we'll move on. Let's move on to recommendations. So members are asked to note that the assets listed at paragraph 3.2 in this report that are considered by the legal service manager as suitable for inclusion in a list of heritable common good properties for the former borough of Kircudbright. Appendices 1 to 18.
Noted.
Noted.
Thank you very much. Moving on to number 5, Kircudbright Common Good Fund and the final outrun of 2021 to 22 and financial plan of 22 to 23. I would like to welcome David Hurston from Brewing Dolphin to the meeting. David, could I ask you to give us information on the investment and interest income from the 21 to 22 year?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll just share my screen if that's okay. Prepared the usual presentation pack.
Okay, that's fine.
Can you all see that okay? Great. So yes, what an interesting time to be coming to talk to you about investments and economics generally. Um, First of all, starting off as we usually do, looking at how things have fared over the last year on the left and then 10 years on the right. So the last year has been characterized by volatility in markets. As we came into 2022, there were already worries about inflation, which had been picking up. And then, of course, the tanks rolled across the border in February into Ukraine, making an already difficult situation even more complicated. And inflation and higher interest rates have been the main story as we've gone throughout 2022 so far. Looking at the individual investments, individual markets on the left-hand side, the green line at the top is the S&P 500, which is the American index, which continues to do reasonably well. The blue line is the UK market, which has actually done not too bad over the course of the last 12 months. And looking to the other end of the scale, the red line at the bottom is the FTSE Government All Stocks Index. So that's lending money to the government, which is generally deemed to be a safe investment. And when your safe investment is down by over 20%, that does tell you that it has been a difficult operating environment. Similarly, at the bottom there, the black line is the European index, and their reliance on Russian gas is having a bigger impact on their economy and sentiment towards Europe than other parts of the world. So it has been a very choppy year so far, one characterized by volatility. I think it is also worthwhile including the 10-year chart there. So if we look on the right-hand side, the S&P 500 in America has been the standout investment. Why has it been so strong? America is home to many of the fastest growing and best known companies in the world, so the likes of Microsoft, Apple, Tesla cars. So we've seen a huge growth there over the last 10 years. The UK market over the last 10 years hasn't been such a good investment. So you can see there, that's sort of towards the bottom of the pack. So that's just a very quick overview of what's been happening over the last year. Another feature of markets which has made it very difficult has been a substantial change in market leadership. So in 2020 and 2021, markets were led higher by technology names. So if you think of the likes of Amazon and Netflix and Zoom Communications did very well in lockdown as we were spending more time at home. As we've come into 2022, the opposite has been true, and consumer services and technologies sectors have been most disappointing. It wasn't that long ago that the oil price was under $30 a barrel. Sitting here today, up over $90 a barrel. That has a very direct benefit to the oil and gas sector, which is up by over 50% year to date. Utilities also, defensive qualities have held up pretty well. So we've seen a really short, sharp change in market leadership in 2022 compared to 2021. And we have spoken in previous meetings about ESG investing. So that's environmental, social and governance considerations. And I'm afraid it's been the big, dirty, old economy type stocks which have been doing best so far this year. So BAE Systems, British American Tobacco, Shell and BP leading the way higher. So looking at the Common Good Fund, just to remind you, the investment objective we have in place is to generate a combination of income and long-term capital growth. And on our scale of 1 to 10, the investments are managed with reference to risk category 6, with no formal restrictions placed upon the portfolio. So as at your last year end, the 31st of March 2022, the investment standing at £919,606. As we sit here as at the 20th of September 2022, we are a little bit lower than that, £856,787. So we are down by just over 5% since the end of March. And the principal reason for that has been that we have less invested in companies like oil and gas and BAE Systems and British American Tobacco, and a bias more in favour of the sort of technology and growth names which have been a little bit left behind so far this year. Nevertheless, the year to the end of March 2022 was a positive one. So the portfolio was up by 7.4% in total return terms. We've included here two comparators. One is the ARC steady growth figure. So just to remind you, that stands for Asset Risk Consultants, and is a comparison with other charities with similar investment objectives and attitude to risk. So it's a peer group comparison, and we've also included the risk category 6 comparator in there as well, and you can see the longer term numbers. But in the short term, performance has been a little bit behind benchmark because of that bias that we have away from economy stocks and in favour of new economy stocks. So income, this has been the subject of some discussion in previous meetings. The estimated yield is 2.4%, which is just over £20,000 a year. We do expect that we will see some fairly good dividend growth this year. We are still seeing a bit of a catch up in dividends from the massively disrupted period in 2020. So we do expect that that income figure should rise this year. Also, I think companies' boards will come under pressure with inflation being so high to match that inflation as much as they can. Just to give some context to that figure, the yield on cash is sitting at 1.75% at the moment. That is likely, in fact, almost certain to go there this week with the Bank of England's meeting. So we'll probably see another 0.5% increase in interest rates. If we lend our money to the government today for 10 years, they give us 3.2% a year and give us our money back. It wasn't so long ago that that gilt yield was sitting at around 0.5%. So that has been a substantial change. Then, of course, the figure which jumps off the page there, inflation sitting at 9.9%. It has fallen slightly from where it was last month, where it was 10.1%. But I'm afraid that things are still going to get worse before they get better. And I will come on to address inflation a bit later in the presentation. So in terms of the asset allocation of the portfolio, this is how it is positioned relative to our risk category 6. So we have less invested in fixed interest than the benchmark does, so 12.5% compared to 17%. So rising interest rates and rising inflation are generally bad news for fixed interest, so that's why we're underweight there. Broadly in line in UK equities, very slightly overweight in overseas equities, but we have been trimming that equity weighting over the course of the last 12 months, and the majority of the proceeds from those sales have been going into alternatives, which is a combination of some absolute return funds and some infrastructure. We have a small amount of commercial property and a small amount of cash, but you can see there that the investments are broadly reflective of the risk category that we have agreed with you, with one or two tilts to reflect market conditions. The top 5, bottom 5 performers over the year to the end of March 2022, it has been a very volatile period, and that has been borne out with some of the underlying stock performances. Reflecting that trend I talked about, with energy companies doing well, the investment in Shell has been the best performer over this period, up by over 50%. We have had some recovery from the property investment there managed by Aberdeen, which is up by 40%. AstraZeneca has been in the news a lot, but it hasn't been the coronavirus vaccine that's been driving the share price. It has been recent good news on a number of oncology drugs coming to market. Tritax Big Box, a strange name, just to remind you, that is a real estate investment company which specialises in owning distribution centres, so big boxes, if you like, and demand for that sort of product was very strong in lockdown, with more and more things being bought online. And then lastly, Relx, the data business. What's not gone so well? The least encouraging performances came from two investments with exposure to China. So as we came into 2021, sentiment towards China was riding high, but over the course of the year, the Chinese government became more interventionist, started interfering in certain parts of the economy in China, including areas like education and property. We saw a lot of the good sentiment that was towards China at the start of the year turning. The Morgan Stanley Asia Opportunity Fund had around 30% of its portfolio invested in China, and Prudential has now moved most of its operations to Asia, Hong Kong, and China. So I think longer term, these China investments still remain much more of an opportunity for us rather than a threat. But in the short term, the share prices have been volatile. Similarly, Fidelity Emerging Markets is affected to some extent by that. Baillie Gifford American was an excellent performer during 2020 and 2021, but over the last year has been more disappointing. It has a bias towards many of the technology names which benefited most from us spending time at home. Amazon's in there, Tesla, Zoom Communications were all large investments. And as we've come into 2022 with these very different conditions, we have seen the shares giving back some of their gains. And then Admiral car insurance, cars, we're all bashing into each other once again, which has been a more difficult operating environment for Admiral, which again has seen some of the premium come out of the shares. Since the end of March, we have seen some companies' share prices holding up reasonably well. Unilever has done pretty nicely. Compass Group, the catering business, has continued to recover. Shell has continued to be positive. And then some of the more defensive holdings in America, and then the renewables infrastructure group there holding up quite nicely. Tritax, having been very good last year, has been more disappointing this year. I still think the long-term structural drivers of us buying more and more online remain very much intact. And I think this is very much a holding that we would want to continue to have for the long term, even if in the short term the shares have been a bit lower. Intertech is a safety and certification business. Again, another area where I think there are very strong structural drivers intact. And they've also expanded recently in measuring carbon emissions, which again I think is another area which is something that we want to be exposed to long term. But these sorts of growth businesses have been pretty by them. Rio Tinto, the company's business, we've seen some weakness come through in commodities in the short term, which has come through in the shares. Halma, another company involved in things like fire detection, which again is another area where I think the long-term structural drivers are very strong. And in fact, the recent results from the company have been very good, but in the short term, the share prices have been weak. So it has been an unusual operating environment. Many of the sorts of companies that we want to own for the long term have been some of the weaker performers in the short term. But we've been through the portfolio, revisited the investment case for each of the underlying holdings, and taking a longer term view, we're still very comfortable to hold on to these companies. And I think we can say that in 5-10 years' time, they are going to be meaningfully more profitable than they are today, even if we are seeing some weakness in the short term. So just to remind you, we've had some questions from clients. Why have we not sold these technology holdings and reinvested oil and gas company and BAE Systems and tobacco at the turn of the year? So what we believe, what is our investment approach? Market timing is something which is incredibly difficult to do. It's incredibly difficult, I think, / impossible to do with any consistency over longer timescales. So what we do instead is we aim to buy and hold high quality investments and hold them for the long term, which does mean sticking with them through thick and thin. And this year has been a difficult period in terms of share price performance. So attractively valued growth markets, sectors and companies we believe will continue to outperform over the long term. So what we're seeking to do is to buy predictability over uncertainty easier said than done, and key to that is being able to have a long-term outlook. And certainly at times our patience is being tested this year, but I still think this bias that we have in favour of companies that are growing will benefit the Common Good Fund over longer timescales. Why do we have this bias in portfolios? So this quality growth factor historically has produced much better returns than just average companies. So here, looking at annualized returns between 1986 and 2021, if you had just invested in all the companies in the world, so that's the MSCI World there, you would have had 10% per annum. But if you've had this quality growth bias, as we seek to have, you could have experienced 12.5% annualized. And when that extra performance is compounded over longer timescales, it's a powerful performance generator. So just in the short term, this is what we've been doing in the portfolio. I mentioned that we had been reducing some of the equity exposure. So you can see that exercises in February and May and August to reduce equities, and that has all been going into diversifiers within alternatives in the portfolio. So in terms of markets, we really can't talk about the world generally just now without mentioning inflation. These are the Bank of England's projections. They're not updated for the intervention from, or any intervention from the new Prime Minister. It is quite difficult to keep your charts up to date these days. But to put some numbers around this was pre-Liz Truss taking over. Inflation was expected to peak at around 13% in October. If she is successful in agreeing this £120 billion price freeze that has been talked about, things are still going to get a bit worse, but that peak will come down from around 13% to around 10.5%. So I'm afraid things are still going to get worse before they get better. I've broken down there the contribution of different parts to the inflation numbers, and you can see that most of it is being driven by petrol prices and energy bills. That said, we do expect things to start to get better from next year, but CPI is very likely to remain above the Bank of England's target for all of next year and most likely most of 2024. So what was initially thought of as being a transitory spike in inflation does now seem as though it's going to be a feature of markets, certainly most of next year and next, but the numbers should start to ease next year. And I think once we can be sure that we are seeing a downward trend in inflation, I think that will be a catalyst for us to start to move on from this difficult period. The problem really is here. Russia is a huge supplier of a number of commodities. Oil and gas are the two which are talked about most for obvious reasons, but it's not just oil and gas, it's precious, it's fertilizers, it's food. Ukraine as well is a huge supplier of wheat internationally. So if we're not going to be able to rely on these sources, or these sources are going to be compromised, we're going to pay the other source commodities that and one we've seen. And I'm afraid it does have a real impact on economies. So these are IMF, International Monetary Fund, growth forecasts for 2022 on the left and then 2023 on the right. So the orange bars are where your expectations were in April, and then the blue bars are where expectations were in July. So that's only 3 months apart, but you can see there has been quite a meaningful downgrade in the expectations for what we expect economies to do this year and next. And if you look to next year, uncomfortably, the UK is expected to grow by only 0.5%. And in fact, I think now that might be a little optimistic, and the conversation has moved on from when we see, will we see a recession to when will we see a recession and how bad is it likely to be. Our view is that we're not on the brink of another financial crisis, but we do see a relatively modest recession next year. To give that some historical context, there was a recession at the start of the 1990s. So that was negative GDP growth of 2.1% over 5 quarters. And we expect that this time round is going to be broadly similar to that. And I think that's what's being priced in by markets at the moment. So to some extent, this weak economic picture is already being reflected in prices that we're seeing at the moment. So in gloom, it's not been terribly cheery so far. I think it is important when we're sitting here in these times of uncertainty to keep the long-term context. So this is the S&P 500, which is the main index in America, going back to 1975. And I've plotted various geopolitical events on the chart going back, and you can see that whilst in the short term, very dispassionate way of looking at the world, and when the time comes to move on from this, investments to come out the other side. The companies we've got in the portfolio are operationally still doing very well. They have strong balance sheets, and importantly, they have something which we call pricing power. So that's the ability to pass inflation on to their customers, which ultimately should lead to higher profits and dividends. So it has been a difficult year so far. And I'm afraid the next few months might continue to be quite choppy. I think once we get into next year and we can be sure that inflation is showing signs of a meaningful downtrend, that should act as a catalyst for better markets. But I'm afraid in the short term, things might continue to be fairly choppy. So I'll stop presenting there.
Okay, thank you very much for all that, David. Thank you for explaining. Does any members of the community representative have any feedback or questions?
Yeah, is it possible to get a copy of those slides, please, David?
Absolutely, send them through straight away afterwards.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, I think it would be useful if everyone maybe got an email there actually with the information. Any other questions, comments? Okay, that's great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, David.
I'll leave you to get on with the rest of your business.
Okay, great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep, so now moving on to recommend. So members are asked to agree to the financial objectives of the financial plan being to make sure net free income available for distribution by the Common Goods Subcommittee as detailed as 3.4. Agree the financial plan for 2022-23. Oh. Sorry, was someone asking something?
No, just generally we agree them as we go through rather than agree them as a whole.
I regret, Mr. Chairman, I do have one or two questions about the accounts that you have in front of you.
Yeah, sure.
I don't need to hold it, do I? No. First of all, on the balance sheet on Appendix 2, it shows investments at £919,683.89. I'm unable to reconcile that figure in any way whatsoever with the closing balance at 31st March 2021, or with the statements provided by Bell Lorry, or Bell Bruin Dolphin, sorry, as per their valuation statement. The figures don't make sense. They don't add up. It also says on the income for the Common Good Fund that at note 3, investments have been realised totalling £8,595. This makes absolute no sense with the figures shown in Bruin Dolphin's statements, where on the 21st of February, and they sold investments, 2 investments totaling £9,759, and they have subsequently sold more investments before 31st of March. These figures don't reconcile, nor is there any link between these figures and the balance sheet. That's my first comment. The second comment is in respect of the balance sheet itself, where on the balance sheet you are showing a schedule for heritable properties totaling £618,002, but at 31st March 2021 they are valued at £656,381.36. There is absolutely no trail in the accounts to show what has happened to these valuations, closing figures. And another small point is that under payments of grants totaling £7,000, there is no link between that figure and the figure shown in the previous year's accounts, where there were amounts paid totaling, if I can just bear with me a second, totaling £127,737.09, but that included credits from the Millennium Youth Football Club of £2,262.91 and £5,000 credited from broadband. How have these entries been reversed? Those are 3 points of concerns that I have in respect of the accounts alone.
Thank you for those points. Do we have a response for that? Yes, we do. McFarlane, did you have a Councillor McFarlane? Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's unfortunate that this councillor is actually posing these to you, because obviously you won't have an answer to these, and perhaps Dolphin Bruin would have been the person to ask these questions of, as they're the people who have been invested in it. Leave it at that, thanks.
Chair, if I could just come in, please, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Unfortunately, we don't have a finance officer with us today, but I have certainly taken a note of all the comments that Community Councillor Lindsay Forbes has mentioned today, and I will take those back to the team and try and get a response as quickly as possible to that.
Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the Community Council, I would ask that until the Community Council is satisfied with the accounts and the 3 points raised, that nothing further be agreed in respect of these accounts.
Okay, yeah, so if we leave that now and we move on to the second, we won't move on to any action until there's been discussion with the financial staff regarding these issues. Okay, so moving on. Oh,
Sorry, Chair, can I just
think we've
check
got
the other, what the feelings of other members would be around that suggestion? Thank you.
yeah, sure. Is there any members, other members, do you have any views or comments or? Yeah, councillor.
Yeah, thanks for letting me in, convener. Lindsay obviously has got a background in accounting, which I don't think we have as a collection, but in terms of what Lindsay is proposing in terms of us not agreeing to the recommendations is that the report would have to come back, I think, to the Common Good Subcommittee at our next meeting, and for a finance officer to speak to the issues that are raised.
Could I interrupt, Mr. Chairman, and say that I would welcome, on behalf of the Community Council, discussing, if possible, before a further meeting of the Common Good Fund Committee, that so as to cause as least disruption to councillors' time in respect of that. But as councillor has indicated, I do have an accounting background, and I have, although I'm saying it myself, a lot of experience in respect of accounting and auditing matters. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, Chair, if I may.
Sorry.
Yes, if I may, thank you. I did attend a Kircudbright Community Council meeting back in July, I believe it was, and Mr Fortune raised the same issues then. Submitted an EMES to our finance department to ask them about it. Clearly, I didn't have the specifics that he's gone into today, but I was reassured by the finance department that everything was in order and that had been dealt with appropriately. It seems that we're dealing with nuance here, perhaps. I'm mindful that we do go through recommendations and approve them as such, but with the caveat that we do take it to finance, as Ingrid has suggested, and should any issues be identified, that we do bring it back to our next meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the comments made by Councillor McFarlane.
Oh, thank you very much for that, McFarlane. I do recommend that maybe we have a discussion at the next meeting, talking about the outcomes at once after the financial team have had this discussion. I think we should agree that we move this on to the next meeting, or maybe, if you would prefer to follow through with the recommendations today with a chance to review the financial team.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm having difficulty in quite hearing what your interpreter is saying.
That's fine. So Councillor McFarlane, so decided that maybe it might be better if we decided to approve the recommendations, and we can go into more detail at the next meeting once the discussion has been made with the financial team. Do they want to accept McFarlane's recommendation to carry on, and in the next meeting we can carry on with further reviews? Is that correct, Councillor McFarlane? Yeah. Yeah. Councillor Campbell.
Thanks for letting me in again, convener. I agree with Councillor McFarlane. We deal with the paper that is in front of us today. Ingrid, as she said, has taken a note of some of the the issues that Lindsay has identified, and she'll come back to us with verification on those figures. So I think we deal with the recommendations today and we make progress now onto the application for grants.
Okay, that's fantastic. Right, so we'll move on. Thank you, Councillor Campbell, for that. Moving on to number 6. Application for financial assistance from Kircudbright Common Good Fund. Ingrid Gemel
Sorry.
will again answer any questions or address any comments from members of the subcommittee.
Sorry, Chair, can I just say that we still need to go through the recommendations from the previous item? Thank you.
Oh, my apologies, sorry. Yeah. With the 4 recommendations, have they been agreed with the notes and been noted?
Agreed.
Agreed.
And everyone's agreed on that? Yeah. On all 4 notes? Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much. Now moving on to number 6.
May I interrupt? Are we saying that the grants have we just agreed that the grant should be paid in full? No, I'm lost.
Can anyone comment back on that just to clarify?
That will be the next report that members will be considering.
Yeah. No, sorry, we're moving on. Yeah, sorry, we're moving on to number 6 now. We've just agreed on number 5. And now we're moving on to application for financial assistance from Kircudbright Common Good Fund. And there was 2 comments on that. So we have Ingrid Jamel will again answer any questions or address any comments from members of the subcommittee. Ingrid, are you here?
I certainly am. So we have 2 applications for financial assistance to Kircudbright Common Good Fund. One is for Kircudbright Parish Church, who have requested £4,500 towards roof repairs. And the second one is from Kircudbright Festivities, who have requested £5,000 towards the cost of gazebos, which they can then share with other community organisations throughout the town when they would find that useful. The Community Council have been consulted on both applications, and they have recommended that the Kircudbright Parish Church are awarded £4,500 as applied for, and that Kircudbright Festivities are awarded £3,000 for their application. It is, of course, up to members what they wish to award, if at all, these organisations. And the other thing to point out is that the application for the parish church is actually being considered retrospectively. That is not at the fault of the organisation, it is just because of the timing for committees post the election.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Ingrid. Members and community representatives, do you have any comments or questions on this report? Councillor McFarlane?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm happy to support both of these. The church hall is a key facility within the organisation, and Kircudbright some festivities do some excellent work around the community involvement and providing services as well as entertainment for guests during the summer and things like that. So I'm quite happy to support both. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Councillor Campbell?
Thank you, Convener. It's a question for Lindsay, please, in relation to the summer festivities application. The Community Council have recommended an award of £3,000, but the request was for £5,000. Could you maybe give us some explanation on why you determined the recommendation for £3,000, please?
Thank you, Councillor Campbell.
Very much, Lindsay?
Sorry, am I?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry, yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm reporting what the fellow councillors came to a decision on. Unfortunately, because of timing, meetings, this was done by email. We had hoped to have a discussion about this at our last community council, which you were present at, but as you are aware, we did have problems, and sadly Councillor Swan had to leave because his wife was dreadfully ill, and I'm sorry to report has sadly died. So we were unable to, as a council, meet together, but I'm merely reporting what by email was the feeling of the community councillors by email amongst ourselves. Regretfully, we haven't met to discuss this.
Okay, thank you very much, Lindsay.
Could I come
May I
back
ask
in, convener?
Councillor Campbell, how do you feel with that response?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that news about the passing away. The reason I asked the question was, I totally understand, that you haven't had the chance to sort of meet and discuss it in person, but one of our criteria, or sorry, for monitoring of awards is applicants should be encouraged to become self-sustaining over a time. I was just wondering if that was in the thoughts of the Community Council, because summer festivities have, benefited certainly over the last 5 years that I've been on the Community Council, but, there has to be a point, I suppose, in which they are fully self-sufficient. But, I'm happy to support the recommendation of the Community Council, but it is something I think, that we need to be thinking about with any application, is whether that organisation is working towards being self-sustained. Obviously, the first application by the parish church, I think, is is a single issue, one-off. But summer festivities is an annual event. So I just see Lindsay's maybe wanting to come back in response to that.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree fully with the comments made by Councillor Campbell. I haven't seen the accounts for the Kircudbright Summer Festivities, which is a standalone registered charity, but I understand that their balance sheet is probably in a quite healthy position. And we have in the past, as regards previous grants, made certain conditions. For example, help with the tattoo at the end of August, where we considered that it was probably apt and appropriate that charges for tickets be made to help finance the event, and that is now done. So I agree with Councillor Campbell on his comments in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. So I recommend we move forward on to 2.1. Note that a forecasted free income balance of £21,190 is available for disbursement in 22 and 23 financial year. Has that been noted?
Noted.
Okay, thank you very much. And then 2.2, note the agreed grant criteria for funding as detailed as Appendix 1.
Noted.
Has that been? Yeah. Thank you very much. And 2.3, consider and agree awards the application as detailed in paragraph 3.9 to 3.11 and Appendix 2. Has that been agreed and noted?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Can I, sorry, Chair, can I just come in and check what we have agreed? Is it the amount applied for or the amount recommended?
Yes, we've agreed the recommendation, all recommendations.
Yeah, I think what we've agreed is the full grant application for Kircudbright Parish Church and the recommendation for summer festivities from the Community Council of £3,000.
That's correct. Yes, thank you for clarifying that. Thank you. Councillor Campbell, thank you very much. Ingrid, are you okay with that?
Yes, thank you
could
very
you-
much. That's perfect. Thank you.
Is any other business deemed urgent by the chairman due to the need for a decision? I have no urgent business, so that concludes the, sorry for yourselves.
Yes, Mr.
Anything anyone wants to bring?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it's pedantic, but the Community Council, in reading the notes, I know it's not urgent, etc., but wondered why the Community Council is being described as the former borough of Kircudbright. We still are here.
Does anyone wish to respond to that? Lindsay, could anyone wish to respond to Lindsay or provide any feedback on that?
If I could just come in, Chair, I would assume that that is in relation to what would have been the former borough when the deeds were established, but I will certainly go back and check with our legal team that that is the case.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Lindsay, are you happy with that response? Sorry, Lindsay, are you happy with that response?
Sorry, yes, I am. Thank you.
No problem at all. Thank you everyone for your contributions. And thank you as well for all your patience with me as the new chair and using the interpreter. And thank you for your understanding that I am learning the process, and I look forward to the next meeting. And we have a date for the next meeting, don't we, confirmed? Ingrid, is that confirmed, our date for our next meeting?
We don't have a confirmed date as yet, but we will send that out in due course.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I hope you all have a lovely day, and thank you, interpreter, as well. Thank you.